Good evening, friends, and welcome to this episode of The Watchdog. Thank you all very much for joining us here today. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are living in biblical times. I want to go ahead and stall a little bit for time to just remind you guys, please do like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to this channel if you have not done so. Please consider hitting that bell to get notified every time we go live. We do these Watchdogs live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here on YouTube. We also post them afterwards, not live, but they do get posted same day on Rumble and BitChute. So if you guys are interested in this podcast, interested in a new conservative voice that is more traditionally, constitutionally conservative and not your modern day, well, I won't put a name on it, so we'll call it neoconservative, then definitely check it out. Definitely consider subscribing. We appreciate you guys being here. Couple very brief channel housekeeping things we want to establish here today. First things first, do want to let you guys know we do have our new logo. I know some of you guys are already aware of that, but if you go look down on the little YouTube thing where it says the Synagogue News, you'll see instead of the black background with the white caveman logo that we typically had, we still have the caveman logo, but we've now placed it on and Captain America shield with the slogan, think like a Neanderthal, right? Because hey, if the left wants to call us Neanderthals because we don't appreciate their tyranny, then we'll own it. Why not, right? So think like a Neanderthal, tune into the Synagogue News. That's our new title there. Also want to remind you guys, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Parler, on Gab, on Minds. I personally would absolutely recommend you use Parler, Gab, or Minds as a way of combating the social media overlords. However, if you don't have accounts there, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. And lastly, but not leastly, I do just want to remind you guys that we are going to have Memorial Day. I don't know what you want to call it, right? But basically just a celebration, April the 10th of next year. I know that's a long time away, but we want to make sure everybody's planned for it. A sort of get-together rally sort of thing, if you will, for the preservation of history. Obviously, we've gone through a long period of time in the recent years, people not only taking down things like monuments, but even cleaning, like, you know, we referenced in our previous episode, cleaning out Nazi imagery from video games where you're killing Nazis, which of course doesn't even make any sense. Why are you killing these people in the game if they're not Nazis? The idea just being that we are seeing history cleaned out before our very eyes. So we're going to have a little event around that, hopefully get some kind of movement there started. And that's all we have for announcements today. I want to jump right into the guest because we don't want to waste any of his time. And we are very blessed to be joined today with gubernatorial candidate Ammon Bundy. I am personally a little bit stunned to actually have this interview, considering it is not even unlikely that you could
I've lost you. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'll log in again. Not sure what's going on.
Sorry, it looks like my other camera went out for a minute, so I'm using my phone for the moment. I'm not sure what happened. I think it was just a Wi-Fi issue. Can I be heard and seen or anything like that by the audience? Shoot. Doesn't appear that he's actually here. Sorry about that. It looks like I just cut out for the slightest bit, but I think I got you back.
I can hear you. I couldn't hear you earlier, but I can hear you now.
So, we are sorry about that, friends. Just that was a brief Wi-Fi problem on my end. I'll be operating on the phone until it turns back on. Back out, come back in. Fret not. I'll be turning my Wi-Fi back on. But so what I was saying here is, this is actually a pretty huge interview for us here at the Watchdog, as you could potentially be future governor of our state. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here, Ammon.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Um, so because of course, oh, by the way, guys, if you like this hat or shirt, these are both going to be found at votebundy.com. This is an Ammon for Band shirt. This is Keep Idaho, Idaho. You guys can see that. But nonetheless, those would be ways that you help support the campaign there, as well as just show your support in public. So, who is Ammon Bundy, and why I want to have an interview with him?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I just another man. I've got a beautiful wife. I've been married for 20 years, and I have 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. My oldest is almost 19. My youngest is 6 years old, and everywhere in between. And that's mostly who I am. I was raised on a ranch in southern Nevada. I'm the third son of Clive and Bundy, and I also left the ranch when I was young, just because I had a bunch of brothers and sisters, and my dad made it pretty clear that the ranch wasn't going to be able to provide a living for all of us. So I left the ranch and started into the commercial fleet maintenance business, where I managed and maintained commercial trucks, and I built a business off of that. 21 years I had that business, and we did really well. I had, I've hired hundreds of people and had, done a lot of work in the commercial fleet maintenance business, and that's your big trucks, your over the road trucks, your delivery trucks, all the big trucks that you see driving around delivering. That we took care of them from all the way from painting body to rebuilding engines to installing body works and all of that. And I had one of the largest fleet maintenance shops in Phoenix, Arizona. And I also built a fleet maintenance shop management software. It took me several years. I took all the knowledge of, almost 2 decades of knowledge and put it into a software, and began to sell that to other shops all over the country, actually all over the continent. And it now is one of the largest fleet maintenance, or one of the most premier, I should say, and largest fleet maintenance softwares on the continent. And anyway, so that's a little bit of history about who I am. I literally grew up on the side of the Virgin River in the Virgin Valley next to Mesquite, south of Mesquite, kind of a river rat, and grew up on a ranch there, way out of town. And you know, learned how to work there, learned how to treat people, learned how to take care of things, and then went into business. And that's kind of the beginning of who I am. But mostly, I love the Lord, and I love my family, and I love this country. I love to work and produce.
Awesome, awesome, and thank you for that. And your claim to fame, if you will, is a willingness to stand up to the not only the federal government but also recently even state governments when they have been encroaching on liberties for a lot of different reasons. I think the big one originally was kind of like you were mentioning, ranching, but then recently we had a lot of stuff about COVID-19. Obviously, there's a lot of things that the media likes to say about all of those events. But what is your side of those events? Why is it that you decided that these were things that you wanted to actually take a stand for and fight for?
Well, I was pretty much, I think, like everyone else when well, I mean, I don't want to stereotype, but I was, I had my business, I had my family, and I mostly just want to be left alone and live life. Whenever something really came up, unless it was something really significant or very close to me, I just tried to ignore it. And because, you have to pick your battles, and you've got to, be able to live life. Well, anyhow, something happened very close to me. It happened to my father's ranch in 2014. when basically the federal government tried to take it. They tried to do a big land grab and steal my father's ranch. And, it was unconstitutional. It was unlawful. It was illegal. And they came and basically did it with the pointing the guns at us. And they sent 213 armed federal agents, surrounded my dad's ranch, threatened us, threatened them. And ultimately I got involved because it is my nature to, kind of stand up for the, I don't know, the, I guess someone who's being abused, or someone's being bullied. It's kind of my nature to stand up for that person, kind of the underdog.
Right.
And of course, this.
Oh, sir, I think we lost your sound a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
So anyway, I went there and did all I could, and they threatened us that if we resisted in any way that they would kill us. And we began to film them. Anyway, I won't go into the full story, but we exposed them really bad. And the American people all over the country came and stood up for us, and ultimately drove them off. And then it kind of put me on a path of like understanding that we weren't in the secure situation that we thought we were in. I thought, we were in a pretty good place in this country, and that we were going to be okay, and that there wasn't a whole lot going wrong. There was just a couple little things going on that was happening maybe to my family that needed to be corrected. And what happened is I learned that, to be honest with you, the whole darn thing is corrupt. And I began to expose that. And of course, when you expose things like that, you become a target. I also began to stand for other people. And that's how I was exposing it, by, people that the same thing was happening to them that was happening to our family. And I felt like it was my duty to stand up for them. So we began to do that, and ultimately, put a big target on my back. And I don't mind that target, but I just keep doing it. Here in Idaho, I've done it a bunch. I've had these people in government, which I'd like to talk about who they are at some point, but they have tried to charge me with very serious charges, felony charges, all of that. Tried to charge me 34 times. Well, they have charged me 34 times, and I fought them in court and beat them every time but one on a misdemeanor. And they'll keep doing it, and I'll keep fighting them. And I'm doing it to protect people, to stand up for those that are being bullied, and also to show the American people the situation, the awful situation that we're in, and how if we want to preserve the really good things that we have, which we truly are very blessed people. And if we want to preserve that and pass that on to the next generation, that we need to do some things now. That's what's driven me to run for governor as well.
And I do want to quickly emphasize before my next question something that you said, because I think it's important for people to remember. There's a lot of people who will give labels to people like yourself that are just absurd. They're lies, basically, right? Things like extremist and stuff like that. But you have won every single time that you've gone to court, with the exception of a small misdemeanor, including the big ones, like 2014. So that's important for, I think, people to remember is, the media paints this one way, but even the courts will admit that you and your family have operated within the confines of the law.
Yeah, we've been well within our rights to act the way we have. We've been, acquitted by 2 federal courts. And if anybody knows about those courts, it's very difficult to get justice or the truth to come out. We were facing 106 years of minimum sentencing. They were basically just politically prosecuting us and trying to throw away the key. And ultimately, we were, delivered. I know it was through the grace of God that we were delivered, and we exposed them. Just kind of give your listeners an idea. They spent $100 million trying to prosecute my family and I, and they were not able to get it done. And so anyway, and that's what happens when you stand up. It happens when you stand up when not enough people stand with you, then they really can target you. If you stand up and a lot of people stand with you, then it's much more difficult for them to target you. And I've had a lot of support, and I get a lot of support, and I'm blessed with that. But more and more people have to understand the situation we're in, and what we need to do to make sure that we have the right to travel, the right to worship, that we have the right afforded us to trade with each other, to raise our families, to make the decisions that we want to make on our own. Those are important things.
Absolutely. And so with that, I want to ask now some questions that are more specific to the campaign. Now,
Okay.
you mentioned one thing there that I think is going to be first on everyone's mind. Mentioned now, to be fair, it wasn't directly related per se to COVID, but religious freedom has taken probably the biggest hit it's taken, at least in my lifetime, potentially in our nation's lifetime. But I think some people might have some dispute with that. But recently, of course, with COVID, with arrests of people like Tony Spell and John MacArthur and rabbis up in New York and stuff like that. What would be the position of an Ammon Bundy governorship in regards to vaccine mandates, health mandates, and just COVID-19 in general?
Well, that is the crux of what I have found, and what I found in 2014 is that we have these individuals who have occupied the offices of our government. And don't think that we're talking about government as an entity, because government isn't an entity. Government is a bunch of people. And so that's what it is. It's not something that carries its own identification. It is a bunch of people. And so we have, in one way or other, people have got into the offices of government, and they truly believe that they have a right to rule individuals, and that they have flipped our Constitution, our proper form of government, and our ideas of individual sovereignty upside down. And so they believe, at least they want you to believe also, that they have a right to rule you. And that is the battle that we are facing. And so they believe that they have a right to tell you when you can worship, when you can't worship, where and how. They believe that they have a right to rule you in how you travel, where you travel, when you leave your home, when you don't leave your home. They also believe that they have a right to rule you when you're in business and trading with each other. What you can trade, how you can trade, when you can trade, if you can trade. And these are things that were already decided many, many centuries ago, that these rights belong to each person, not to government, not to individuals, again, not to individuals in government. And that's the battle. And we see, like, what was the Revolutionary War fought over in the early, mid 1700s? It was fought over this same question. We had a king and his officers that were trying to say that they had the right to rule. They even claimed that it was a divine right to rule an individual. Therefore, the individual had to serve them. The individual had to get permission from them before they can own land or use land. They couldn't own it, really. They couldn't have their own business without getting permission. They couldn't worship the way they wanted. They had to worship according to the way the king and his officers wanted them to. It's the same exact thing happening again. And the people, the American people, need to be aware of it. And it is the question of who has the right to rule.
So with some of the specifics, so like, for example, I recently went to a Stop the Mandate rally that unfortunately YouTube did not decide was within the confines of their rules, so you wouldn't be able to find it here. You guys can find that video on Parler or Gab, by the way. I do want to note that nothing was said there at that rally against vaccines. It wasn't an anti-vax rally or anything like that. But just a rally down at St. Luke's talking about not having a mandate, right? It's one thing to have a vaccine. It's a completely different thing to mandate a vaccine or have people lose their jobs. Now, obviously, to an extent, powers are limited because companies have the right to do what they want to do. But at least from the state government perspective, how does an Ammon Bundy governorship feel about those specific mandates, like mask mandates and vaccine mandates?
Well, so those mandates are coming from these hospitals and businesses. And I think that we have to be very principled here, because our knee-jerk reaction, our desires that the government gets involved and forces these hospitals not to mandate, forces businesses not to mandate. And I hope you'll hear me out for what I have to say, because this isn't just a simple issue. Because if you have a private company, and I'm talking private, and I'll explain what I mean by that, you do not want the government coming in and telling that private company who they can hire, how they can hire, how they're going to run their business, how they're going to, treat their employees, all of that. You do not want that, because if a conservative legislature can tell a private business how to run their business and how to handle their employees, then a liberal legislature can also do it. And if we, so it can go both ways, or we're talking about a governor or whatever. Now, there's a couple things here. The government, whether it's the governor, the executive branch, or the legislative branch, has no business to interfere with a private business unless that private business has taken public funds. Then all of a sudden the rules change. Then technically they're not a private business anymore. And we certainly have that situation here with these hospitals. They have taken hundreds of millions of dollars of public funds. And it is the legislature's responsibility to make sure those funds are spent properly. Now, the interesting thing with these funds, they were COVID funds, and the private businesses agreed actually to enforce vaccine mandates upon their employees in order to get the funds from the federal government. And so you have this really tough situation where there's actually a contractual agreement called the Memorandum of Understanding, a MOU, that the hospital administrators or owners signed, that they would force vaccines on their employees, and other businesses done the same thing. And now their employees, about a fourth of them, are saying, we're not taking them, we don't want to take them. And they're saying you have to. And if they don't get their employees to take the vaccine, then they are in breach of contract. This is something that's a very deep problem. This is how the federal government controls our states, controls our counties, and controls our businesses and even individuals. They do it by taking the money from the people from it down in the states, taking up to Washington, D.C., and then trickling it down for obedience. And the founders called that undue obedience. So now we have to ask, well, should the legislature get involved if they receive public funding? Well, I think the legislature has a right to. But the question is that the most effective thing? Because will the legislature get it right? And to be honest with you, I don't think they will. I think they'll mandate all businesses, whether they're private or took public funds. And then all of a sudden now we have socialism even more in our businesses, more control, more state force, more enforcement inside our businesses. So I don't think that the wise thing is to get the legislature involved. So then what works? Well, we historically have a lot of examples of what work. And that's when the employees unite together in a large enough band that they can start to require their employer to give them better working conditions, which is not that require vaccines. They need to unite together. And when they do this, you're talking about if a fourth of the employees of these hospitals would unite together, the hospital would almost have to stop mandating. Now, one other thing, and I've talked here a little bit on this topic quite a bit. Haven't given you much time to respond, so I apologize. But
you're fine.
One of the things, it's kind of a complicated. I mean, it's not real complicated, but you just can't take, oh, get the government involved as the answer. I mean, you just can't. And so I'm going to make my point a little bit more, and that is that there's a hospital chain out there by the name of Hospital Corporations of America, HCA. They receive federal funding and read over the memorandums of understanding, and they decided that there is no way that they can make their employees or themselves morally comply to those memorandums of understanding. So they returned the federal funds and said, we don't want it because we're not willing to sign or agree to these memorandums, these MOUs. Well, now they're free. Yeah, they didn't get the money, but they're free. And what's happening is the best doctors, the best nurses, the best staff, they're coming to them and filling out applications because they want to leave St. Luke's, St. Al's, and all these others who are mandating. And this hospital now can choose the best doctors. They don't have a staffing issue. They can grow and expand, open up new hospitals because they have the staff to do it. And that's the way freedom works. Meanwhile, St. Luke's is going to be struggling to just make it so that someone can change the sheets in the hospital beds, and have doctors that actually could do the work they need to do. And their services are going to become inferior. They're going to start struggling. There's going to be lawsuits because they're going to make mistakes. They're going to be understaffed. And that's the difference. When a hospital chooses freedom, just like any other business, they thrive, they prosper, and so do their employees. And it's win-win all the way around. Freedom is truly the answer.
And so in a sentence, would it be fair to say that while a Bundy governorship is certainly opposed to state mandates, Bundy governorship is also opposed to state mandates about the individual businesses and what they can and can't do?
Yeah, that choice to take whatever you want to call it is going to be an individual choice. They have a right to their body. No one else has that right. To even act like they have a right to force someone to inject something into their body is wrong. But a business owner, a private business owner, also has a right to his business, to trade. And he has hired somebody with the understanding that he's paying for that person's time. So the only right that a person has in a private business is to quit, is to leave. They can certainly try to persuade their employer of the dangers of why they don't fill and all those things, and maybe their employer will respect that. But that is the reality. And if you start forcing private business owners to act in a certain way, you literally destroy not only the delicate balance between an employer and employee, but also you destroy the free market to be able to freely trade with each other.
And excuse me. Wow. I don't want to comment too much just because there's a lot of other things I want to ask questions on. But one thing I do want to point to for the audience is just to say, I understand that, especially since a lot of my audience is less constitutionalist and more conservative. Obviously, we have a good mix of both because I myself am a constitutionalist, but obviously it's popular to be a conservative. But to remind those of you who may be uncomfortable with that answer, when's the last time you've heard principle like this, right? And I'm not saying that in any way to persuade people one way or the other. I'm just simply pointing out it's one thing to have a bunch of opinions. It's another thing to be strongly principled. And I, for one, appreciate your answer because of the principle behind it.
Let me defend it a little bit, just with one more statement, if I can.
Absolutely.
We sit here as conservatives, and I would have to say I'm a constitutional conservative, but I appreciate you identifying the difference. As conservatives, we sit here and wonder why our government just gets bigger and bigger and stronger and more oppressive. And we wonder why socialism and communism is literally knocking on our door. And it's because of the idea that most conservatives, even on the right side, think that the answer is government. More government, we got to have government. That's the purpose of government, you know. And it is actually the reason why the momentum towards government control and overreach and corruption, that's the reason why, no matter whether you get someone who's a liberal or someone who's a conservative in office, because they're both taking it the same direction.
Yeah, and I would just remind the audience real quick too, and then I'll move on to the next question. But we do have an example that's right in our faces with this that we're talking about on the Watchdog all the time. So those of you who are watchers of this program, you already know where I'm going with this. I am 100% opposed to Google, YouTube, and Facebook. But what's the Republican Party's main? Those who want to do something about it, what's their main thing? They want to get the state involved and almost create these nationalized systems. And how often do we have watchdogs fighting against that, telling you guys, no, just go get a Gab. It's that simple. You don't need the government going after Twitter. Just go get a Gab, go get a BitChute, and fight with your dollar, so to speak. I know you're not actually paying for these services, but it's just to make your point, right? That conservatives are quite fond of getting the state involved when it is helpful to them, and that's not conservative.
No, that's really not. That's liberalism. That's what the liberals do.
Exactly. Now, another thing here that is going to be very important for people and is also a huge portion of your campaign itself is actually taxation. Taxation, of course, and especially in the recent years, because inflation has skyrocketed due to our COVID policies and is only going to get worse. Now, you take a position that I am 100% game with, but I think that most people don't actually have the fortitude to go as far as, and that is elimination of all property and state income tax. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am proposing the elimination of property tax and income tax, and it's actually very simple. When it comes to income tax, there's 9 other states in the union that have eliminated income tax, including Washington, our neighbor here to the west of us. And it's proven that it is something that is beneficial, can be done. And the fact that our quote unquote conservative Republican leadership hasn't done this is actually shows that, how inefficient and incapable they've been when it actually comes to benefiting the people. Now, property tax is a problem. It's a real problem. It's very immoral because it's basically the state's way of saying that they control everything, which we know that is not right. You really never, ever own your home because you have to pay rent on it even after you've paid the mortgage off, or the state will take it. And the state right now takes homes away from older people who are on a fixed income, or those who get in an unfortunate situation because they can't pay their taxes. Now, this is an issue. It's an issue that we have to resolve. It's an issue that we have to really stand on, because what should happen is once a person pays off their home, they should not have to pay for their home. They should not have to pay a tax, pay someone else to keep their home. They should be able to keep it. But the problem, what most conservatives say, well, how are we going to pay for government? How is the counties going to pay for the schools? How are they going to pay for the things they use it for? How are they going to do this? So the answer is that you have to replace the property tax with a consumption tax. And, I could give you the figures. I won't over this in this interview, but a consumption tax more than pays for any it actually pays even the same or more than what a property tax would pay for. And in that situation, our government gets funded. They get everything they need as far as being able to fund their programs, which I think need to be diminished and limited. But when you pay off your home, you actually own it, and you don't have to pay the tax anymore. And I can go over the details of that if you want, but it's so important in order to people to stay free, for them to truly own your property, your home, your land. And you either have property ownership or property tax, but you can't have both.
Absolutely. And I have often said that I think that all taxation is theft, and if it's necessary, then we need to make sure that the theft is kept to an absolute minimum. Because unfortunately, some evil things are necessary. I think government and ruling over other humans is an inherently evil practice, but also anarchy can't happen, right? So it's one of those things where sometimes in a fallen world we have to deal. And taxation is one of those things. But if we recognize that, then we should try to limit that as much as possible. And I appreciate you trying to do that. One thing
I mean, if I were to explain it, and just, a consumption tax is when you, let's say for your home, it would be when you buy a home, you would pay, our figures is right around a 4 to 5%. You'd pay 4 to 5%. You would lump that into the mortgage. Or if you wanted to pay it off, you could, but you could lump it into the mortgage. And then when you pay the mortgage off, you're done paying taxes and you're done paying the mortgage. You own your home. Now, people might say, well, is that enough for the state? Well, it's not, unless you figure that a home is sold 3 to 5 times in a 30-year period. And so when you do that multiple times by 3 to 5 times, it actually gives the state more funds than the property tax does right now. But the thing is everybody in Idaho will own their homes when they pay off their mortgage. And that's how it works. And also, you get to choose. If you don't want to buy a home, you don't pay property tax. That's your choice. If you want to pay it off early, you can pay it off early. All those things become within your power. But right now we have it where a property tax is assessed every year, which, by the way, it's increased 30% in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's going to increase again another close to 30% if they don't adjust their the way they calculate it, because of the increase of homes. And they assess that every year, and you have to pay on it every year. And even after you pay your mortgage off until the day you die, and then whoever takes your home has to pay it, or you lose your home. It goes into the hands of the state. We have to end that.
Absolutely. And of course, you've already brought it up, but I just want to say it again. A principle for the audience to understand with this. If you're paying for your home, do you actually own it? And of course, the answer is no. That's basically paying rent to the state, right? Mm-hmm. Now, another thing that is, I think, a very important portion of your campaign in particular, and unfortunately, it's something that I think has been attempted a couple times here in Idaho, but every time it is attempted, it appears to be attempted by somebody who is what the media would call fringe, I guess, like a Walt Bays or a Rex Rommel. Now, the media would like to call you fringe as well, but you've managed to break through the popularity wall, so to speak, and make this to where we can actually legitimately talk about it, whereas the other ones didn't. And what I'm speaking of is the take back of federal lands. Rex Rommel is the first one I know of who proposed this back in 2006, but we've also seen the Idaho Constitution Party, Raul Labrador, Russ Fulcher, a whole bunch of people have talked about this. Nobody's ever actually done it, and the people who actually were serious about it, like I said, never got particularly popular. I think this is actually possible now that we have, because like I said, it seems you've broken through the ceiling of popularity, so to speak. But what exactly does that mean, taking back federal lands for Idaho?
So 63% of the land mass within the borders of Idaho are currently being controlled by the federal government. and approximately 72% of the subsurface mineral rights are being controlled by the federal government. This means that the other percent is, so it'll put us at 34%. The other 34%, 37% is, I got to do my math here. The other 30% is basically private property, farms, and housing. And what's happening is we are now, we're in an affordable housing crisis, where we don't have enough housing for the people that live in Idaho. And so the supply is very low, the demand is very high, and we've outpriced almost everybody that lives in Idaho. You have to come from out of state with out of state money in order to even afford a house in Idaho. And so that's a real problem, because what it'll cause is it causes us to build up apartment complexes, high-rise buildings, more dense populated subdivisions. It causes us to build up rather than to build out. And we've seen in history when states have done that, such as Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, all of those states that were not able to build out because the federal government's controlling their lands and resources. All of them had to build up, and they made their cities dense and populated, and then it changes the culture of a people, and it causes them to begin to vote more liberal, and those states end up blue states rather than red states, if you want to identify them that way. And that's just one factor. The other, just being able to use our land and resources. Right now, we're building houses on our agricultural land. We're actually losing our agriculture, which people, if they don't know, agriculture is the #1 industry in Idaho and has been for, ever, it seems like.
Right.
Probably since forever Idaho had been identified. And if we build on we build houses on these fertile, developed, irrigated lands, what are we going to grow our crops on? Where are we going to get the income and stabilize our economy with agriculture? How are we going to do that? So that's an issue, and more reason why we have to build out rather than build up, which is more reason why we have to get control of these lands that are in Idaho. Now, the practicality of it, you might be asking about.
Well, and one thing I would say, though, briefly, just to remind everybody, that number that you gave is like, I mean, and I don't say this insultingly. I just say it to properly express the thought. Like that number is stupid. Like 63% of the state belong. You know what I mean? And I like, in what sense are you even an independent state at that point? That's almost 2/3 of the whole landmass.
Yeah, think about like Nevada. Nevada is 89% federally controlled. That means 11% of Nevada is actually the state of Nevada, actually the people of Nevada. 11%. And in Idaho, it's 37%. And we're literally fighting over 37%. And now we're selling this farm ground off to housing because they can get so much money for it, because because we have this affordable housing crisis. Well, how does that make sense in any way at all when we've got these hills and these rolling hills and sagebrush valleys all over our cities and towns that would be beautiful places to build homes, but we just don't have access to them. And it's absolutely, again, unconstitutional. The federal government, the founders never intended for the federal government to control land and resources inside the state after statehood. It was supposed to belong to the people, be available to the people. And the Constitution in Article 4.3 says that the federal government, or the U.S. government shall dispose of the land. Shall, that's a demand. And they haven't done it. And so my intent as governor is to implement that, to use the mechanisms that I know are available to actually begin to open up these lands and make them available to the people and put them under the proper jurisdiction.
And one thing I want to reference while we're on this, and before we move on to the next topic, is that there is and it's something you might not know of unless you were actually here. So it's something that Idahoans would know of, but those who are watching outside of this state might not be aware of this. Although it does happen in Wyoming and South Dakota and other places as well. So depending on where you live, you might actually have the same experience. But there's extreme hostility from locals and longtime residents towards transients. And a lot of it has to do with exactly what you're talking about, right? The prices of housing going way up, the culture of the state changing. Now, there is a whole litany of things that people have discussed as far as how to deal with this, influx as well as the resulting hostility. But I think it's safe to say if we had more land to provide housing, that could potentially ease a lot of that hostile feeling towards people who in the end are fellow Americans, right? If you moved here from Utah, you are from the United States.
So you're exactly right. Of course, it's going to alleviate the pressure. It's going to balance our housing costs. It's going to provide people with the ability to have a good quality of life, because that's what Idaho provides. That's why people are coming here. They're fleeing here mostly from the West Coast states because of the decisions that the West Coast government leaders have made over the past couple decades. And they're terrible. And the interesting thing is they're fleeing here because they think that Idaho is different. But our Idaho leadership, Republican, pretty much primarily Republican, they're making the same exact moves and the same exact decisions that Oregon made 15, 20 years ago. They're making them now. And that basically the results will be the same as what's happened to Washington, what's happened to Oregon, California. They're going to create a major metropolitan that's going to control the state politically, and all the rural areas and towns around it are just going to be really subsidiaries and servants to it. It's kind of like the Hunger Games, where you got the capital and they've got all these districts, and that's what they create. That's what they created with Portland. That's what they created with Seattle. That's what Las Vegas and Reno is in Nevada. That's what all the major cities are in California. And that's what New Mexico, Colorado, Denver's the same way. They literally turn your state into a capital type Hunger Games situation. And the decisions are being made right now. And that's why I feel like it's important that I get in there, and because I understand what's happening. I see what's happening, and I understand what needs to be done to stop it. And this federal land thing is a significant part of it. It's very important as a people that we have access to our lands and our natural resources.
And then, so, and by the way, just briefly, just to let people know, just think of the difference between, to amplify what you're talking about. The mayor of Boise versus the mayor of, for example, Eagle, which is not mere miles away, right? The political differences are extreme in those two. And it just proves the point, right? Boise has become the quote capital. And by the way, if you guys are listening from Boise, I know a lot of people in Boise consider themselves to be conservative and stuff like that. So I'm not saying it's the whole city, but
and I'm not saying we've lost it either. I'm saying that's what we need to do. We need to make sure we don't lose it. We need to make sure that we spread out and don't become so congested in one area that they can politically not dominate everybody else.
100%. And so the next topic I'd like to address then, another one of the really important things in your personal campaign, and something that I, for one, am absolutely sick to death of Republicans with, because it seems like every election cycle there's a promise about this and then nothing ever happens, and that is abortion. Now, you have said that you actually want to go as far as not defunding Planned Parenthood or anything like that, but actually an executive order to end abortion entirely in the state of Idaho. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so I'm not a huge fan of executive orders. I believe that the executive's responsibility is to put forth the law, and that it's the legislature's responsibility to create the statutes. So executive orders should only be used in emergency situations, and I believe that this is an emergency situation because let me rephrase that. Emergency situation that directly saves lives. And so what I intend on doing on day one, what I will do on day one, is I will issue an executive order, and it would be defining that life begins at conception. And therefore, it is the state's responsibility to protect and defend that life. We already have the state that's supposed to protect life and defend life. They already have the processes. They have the due process. They already have all the offices, everything that are supposed to protect life. I'm just going to declare that life begins at conception, and therefore those systems, those offices, and those things that are set in place already to protect life will apply at the beginning of life, and that is at conception.
Now, one thing that I think is an immediate question for a lot of people, and especially considering, a lot of the things that we talked about earlier, such as your willingness to actually go toe to toe with the government, but also the carefulness to make sure that we are within the confines of the law and not, operating in the riotous nature that we've seen so many go through in the last year. What happens because I think what people's big fear is, I think we might have lost Ammon. Just a moment, friends. We'll go ahead and wait here. Looks like we just had a drop out for a second. The question was going to be in regards to basically what happens if the government says no. So hopefully we'll have Ammon jumping back on here. I'm not sure what happened there, but nonetheless, obviously that's an important question there. So I think it's well, I won't say anything, right? Because we actually do have him back, but
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Can you hear me now?
I apologize. We got cut off and I cannot hear you.
It does not appear. I can hear you. It does not appear you can hear me. So let me go ahead and type something here in the private chat. Let me see. So he says you cannot hear me. I apologize, friends. At least we've gotten already a good solid amount of stuff for you guys to watch before this happened, right? Let's see. Just a moment. I want to make sure, just real quick, can the audience hear me? And also, can the audience hear Ammon when he speaks? Because I
apologize. I don't know what happened.
Can you hear me? No, it doesn't appear so. All right, so the audience hears us, but the problem, I guess, is that just Ammon can't hear me. I can hear Ammon. The audience hears both of us, but Ammon cannot hear me.
Can you hear me?
That's interesting. Oh no, now actually we're saying, I guess we see some people in there saying that they do not hear Ammon. Okay. Can you hear me, sir? Oh shoot.
Well, CJ, I appreciate the opportunity to communicate with you. I wish we could finish it. It was a great questions you were asking me. So I'll sign off here, and hopefully we can get this worked out later. Thank you.
All righty. Well, obviously that's a somewhat anticlimactic way to end. I do apologize for that. It appears what probably happened, I think at some point, we probably had an issue with whatever they could, because it did appear when he came back on, he was on a different, maybe his phone, something like that. So perhaps that's what the issue was there. But nonetheless, did get some pretty good questions there. The last question was just going to be basically, what do we do if the federal government says no? And of course, I think that's a pretty important question. There have been a lot of people here in Idaho who have been asking that same question and trying to figure out ways to go about it. And of course, peacefully. So for example, Heather Scott is an example of that, where she's talked about. And by the way, I just got a text message. We might actually have Ammon call in to finish the interview. So let's see about that for a second. But nonetheless, that was what we were going to ask there. I'm not sure if Ammon would personally agree with Representative Scott, but her and Todd Lakey and a couple others have been discussing, what do we do if the government tells us no in regards to a executive order to end abortion? And of course, that is a very important question, right? Because the left is going to paint it as if we're basically going to have the Civil War, right? And of course, the right is going to paint it as if we can just, do whatever it is that we wish. And neither one of those things is particularly true, right? Although the right one is a little bit more true, simply because, we have seen what happened, like, for example, with states. Oh, hang on. I'm getting a phone call right now, actually. Hello?
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Sorry about that. I don't know why you couldn't hear me.
That's definitely all right. I'm just real quick going to ask the audience, can you guys hear him? I have him on speakerphone and next to the microphone. I can obviously hear it pretty clearly, but I just want to make sure it's coming through for you guys. Can I just have you test real quick, sir?
Yeah, testing 1, 2, 3. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
All righty, and so just give me a thumbs up, guys, if you are able to hear that. And real briefly, while we're waiting, I'll just answer this questioner Slam saying, what is the right? Just the generally considered right, like Republicans and stuff like that. That's what I was referring to when I said that. So we do have, all right, they can hear. Awesome. So I appreciate you calling back in. I'll try and get through the questions here briefly. The question here in particular was just simply, in the event that the federal government challenges the executive order to end abortion, what is it that we can do at that stage to ensure basically that we keep state sovereignty over this matter? Because, of course, the Constitution is on our side in this.
Well, yeah, and the position is the federal government has no authority to come in to try to force force a state, even the executive branch, to how to act and what they're going to do. For example, like prosecution, the prosecutors decide who they're going to prosecute according to our statutes, according to our laws. And it's already been determined that it's not a place of the federal government to come in and say that is, something you can't prosecute on, or that is something that you can't do as an executive. They can try to do that, but that would be the position. We have sovereignty here in Idaho. It's very clear. It's very established. And so that's where we would stand on it. Not only that is, probably the better answer, to be honest with you, is I would immediately begin working with the legislature to actually either change our constitution or at least the statutes in Idaho to protect life at the beginning of conception. And so, when you're talking about lawsuits and courts, and that could be drug on literally for years and years and years. And it's actually a legal tactic of many people on both sides of a dispute to drag it on. And if the federal government got involved, we would certainly, maybe play that tactic until the legislature can get it right. Anyway, so those are some answers there right off the cuff.
Absolutely. And so we got to
add this real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll add this, that I am quite versed in the legal procedures because of, what I have had to gone through as far as the courts and so forth, and have been very successful in being able to secure rights in the courts, even though it's very difficult. So I'm not just saying this out the side of my mouth. I understand the challenges, and I also can see the success that we can have by doing it the way that I'm proposing.
Absolutely. So I want to go through, since we got some of the big portions of your campaign, I want to go through just some quick hot button issues, some of which are issues that you've taken flack from conservatives from, some of which are issues that you've been considered the strongest from conservatives on, and just sort of in a quick and I guess not rapid fire per se way, because I want to give you, of course, time to explain yourself, but just sort of my version of it will be quick quips. Like, what do you think about such and such?
Sure.
So first things first, big thing for Idahoans. What do you think about Second Amendment rights? What's the Ammon Bundy governorship right, or excuse me, position on Second Amendment rights?
Well, it says it shall not be infringed. That was a restriction that the people put on the government. It's very clear, shall not be infringed. And so that's where I stand. Very, very clear on that. I do not believe that the government should be involved in infringing upon a person's right to keep and bear arms. I believe that right is given to an individual by God as a right to self-defense. I also understand that the right to, or the Second Amendment, is not just the right to bear arms. That's the second part of the amendment. The first part is that very clearly it says that in order for a people to remain free, that they have to be armed. And I understand that clearly, and that's my position on it.
Absolutely. What do you think about the Idaho wolf problem?
I think that's a federal government meddling in our lands and resource problem.
Couldn't agree more with that, actually, and that's no need for explanation, even, because that is 100% true. Idaho has a little bit of a bad reputation in regards to education. What is your position on education?
Well, my true and honest position is I don't believe that the government should be involved in the education business. I don't believe the government should be in the education business. the reality is they are, and they have been for a long, long time. And there's a lot of people that want them to be in the education business. So the reality is that's where we're at. And so what I think should happen, and I think it should be very clear, and it should happen with definition. That is, parents who want to educate their own children without interruption from the government need to be afforded that right, and that right needs to be protected. And then those that quote unquote want to use the public funds to educate their children, public schools, I believe the parents should have a choice to where those funds go. And there should be more of a free market type situation, because then if someone is, for example, someone at our school is teaching critical race theory, or whatever curriculum or agenda they might be teaching, and a parent is not okay with it, they have the ability to take their children out, put them somewhere where they want them to go and where they're more comfortable with, and that would actually hurt the schools. And so they would start to react more and care more about what the parents want, and it would reflect on the education of our children. We would get much better education. It would reflect on how our children are taught and what our children are taught. And it also will reward the teachers and the schools that are doing it right. And there's no reason to do it. It would only be beneficial to everybody except those who want to teach something that really shouldn't be taught, or those who don't want to work. That's the only ones who would be adversely affected by that.
Absolutely. How do you feel about, and this one is, of course, one that has been somewhat controversial recently. How do you feel about police overreach and the defund the police movement?
That's a great question. A really good question, because I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to answer, because I believe that protecting individual rights, protecting rights, and the law doing that is absolutely necessary for freedom, right? And you have to have somebody that's going to be doing it, and they have to do it. It has to be their job. And so I support the idea and premise and legitimacy, and biblically and constitutionally, I support law enforcement in that way. But what I don't support is a police state. What I don't support is things like what President Biden is doing right now, where he's using the law to politically punish a bunch of people and keeping them in prison and all those things, where it becomes a political thing. And so that's right where my position lies. I mean, we have to have police forces to keep people safe and to keep people being able to use and exercise their rights. But whenever it is abused, whenever it becomes corrupted, then the people need to stand up against that and recognize that not all things that all cops do all the time are right. That there's a difference, just like there is with any other person, that they can do things wrong. And just because they wear a badge and have a uniform doesn't mean that they should be honored, and in some cases even almost worshipped. Those people need to be held accountable even more than anybody else, because they hold the very sacred power of the policing and arresting.
And I greatly appreciate that answer too, because I know there are quite a lot of people who will say that, well, Ammon Bundy wants to go as far as abolishing the police. And I always get struck somewhat in my soul by these people, because I recall when I was a kid and first becoming a conservative, that one of the major appeals of the conservatives was accountability for police officers. Like that was our position. And then all of the sudden that became a leftist position around 2015, 2016. And I don't understand that. And I know that they obviously, they've taken it too far. They've, said they want to literally dismantle police organizations and have cities that don't have any sort of law enforcement. Right. But, Ron Paul and the Russell Means and the Constitution Party and people like that have been saying what you're saying now for decades. And they were considered conservatives. Right. So it's one thing that, and I would just remind everybody to amplify that point.
Yeah,
I think
that is what's happened is the deception of the left, and the inability for conservatives to see that deception. And because what they're trying to do is they're trying to divide. And just let me let me try to present this or articulate this without taking too much time, because just like let's say Black Lives Matter says they want to defund the police, right? And their goal is at that point is to, I guess what we say their goal is that if there's no police, then they can get away and do whatever they want to do with, right? And they can act how they want to act and do the things they want to act. And that's what the conservative fear is, right? Well, let's flip it on the other side. There's nothing more than the liberal, wicked, communist, socialist people would want than a police state. That's what communism is. It is a complete police state where everything is common, and the government and including their enforcers basically control everything. That's what it is. So now you've got conservatives falling for this idea that we need, to basically have a police state, and how have they done it? By getting the left to say that we don't need police, or we don't want a police, or we want to defund police, and that they knew that the right or the conservative would go all the way to the other end, and the answer is the balance in the middle. We have to have police accountability. We have to minimize our police forces to what we need. We have to make sure that what they are enforcing is constitutional law and not policies that are made by those who want to control people, that are confused about rights. These things are very, very important we get right. And there should not be this weird dichotomy where it's either one way or all the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to briefly amplify that point. I would just remind, I think most conservatives are probably pretty opposed to the forever wars on the federal level. And yet most conservatives tend to support the troops. And I think if we can parse that one out, then we can probably parse it out at the police level as well.
Good point.
Another one that I think is important for us to address, because I think it's one that you have been misrepresented on, is immigration. What is your opinion on immigration?
Yeah, so interesting enough, I had a individual who I know who is close to a friend to the Constitutional Party chairman here in Idaho. And I don't even know who that is, to be honest with you. I should get myself familiar with him and talk to him. But he said, what about the Constitutional Party supporting Ammon Bundy? He's certainly a constitutionalist. And he kind of was, and the chairman says, well, Ammon's for open borders. I'm pretty sure he's over open borders. I think he said something like that. And I just kind of giggled to myself, because here you got a constitutionalist, supposedly head of the Constitutional Party. He's saying something about me, who really has stood most firm on constitutional principles. Probably I would challenge anybody who's ever stood stronger in the last 6-7 years on constitutional principles in the West than me. And he's willing to completely not even support me because of an idea that the mainstream media put in his head that is completely wrong. And so my position is this, very simple. I believe the way you fix the immigration problem is through your welfare and also through your criminal justice system. And it goes this way. If you are not giving handouts, if you're not giving people free food, free housing, free transportation, and all the advantages of being in this country, if you're not just giving that, then people won't come here for that reason. And second, those that come here to commit crimes on the people, to take advantage through criminal activities, if our criminal justice system was truly working, people around the world would know that they don't come to the United States to commit crimes. And those two things take care of anybody who would come to this country for the wrong reasons. And that's why I didn't really support the wall. That's why I didn't really support all these other immigration attempts to stop immigration. That's why I didn't support those, because none of them work unless you're willing to stop giving handouts and make sure that your criminal justice system is working properly.
Absolutely. And then I think that covers just about everything we would want to talk about for today. But I do have one final question. We'll go with the final question. We're already past the hour point. So I'll wrap up with this in a way that builds yourself up and does not take your opponents down. Why should Republicans vote Ammon over, say, Janice McGeachin, who you guys are quite similar, actually, in a lot of your views?
Well, action. Look at what I have done. Look at if I'm really going to make a difference, and ask yourself this: if you keep doing the same thing, are you going to get a different result? If you vote for Brad Little or Janice McGeachin, what are your results going to be? Is it going to be the same as what has been going on? I think it's time for a true change. And I am not your typical politician. And I will make change. And it will be for the people and not just for the state.
Absolutely. And I think that is definitely a phenomenal answer. Of course, the closest I think you could say that you've gotten to being a politician so far is, I know your brother Ryan ran for governor in 2018 in Nevada, but that's obviously he's not a politician either. So even that comes with an asterisk, right? Ammon, I appreciate you being with us tremendously today. This was an absolutely phenomenal interview. The audience definitely loved it. Where can we find merchandise, contribute to your campaign, potentially go to see your events? And also, what kind of events do you have in the future?
So votebundy.com is where you want to go. Votebundy.com. It's pretty easy. You can go get your gear there. There's the store. There's also the calendar that's going to show you where I'm at. I'm doing a ton of meet and greet. So if your audience wants to put together a meet and greet, reach out to my campaign. I'll come there, talk to you and your friends, answer questions, and we can get to know each other. And then also we're doing, starting at the middle of September 18th, we're having what we're calling a vote to keep Idaho. And we're asking people that are not registered, people that are registered, people that are registered in another party that want to come over to vote for me, to come there. We're having a concert with Jordan Page. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's awesome guitarist and his music songwriter. And we'll have booths there so that you can register to vote or change your party affiliation. And that's on September 18th, 7 o'clock at the Emmett Park here Emmett City Park. That's the first one. And then if you'll go to the calendar, you'll see that almost every week after that, we're going to be having what we're calling the Keep Idaho rallies. We'll be going to Chalice, Moscow, Coeur d'Alene, Pocatello, Idaho Falls, Twin Falls, and then we'll have a great big one in Boise in October.
All righty, absolutely. Thank you very much for that. By the way, friends, links to the to the website is in the live chat right now. I'm going to drop it in the live chat one more time, and I will edit the description to make sure that we have links not only to the website, but also specifically to the events page, and also to a couple other things if you guys want to, for example, follow the campaign on Facebook or Twitter. Brother, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience before we get out of here today?
No, I appreciate the time. I just want to emphasize that it is crucial that we start making the decisions that will keep Idaho. We need to make those now. And our current leadership is not going to make them. They're making the very decisions that Oregon, Washington, California, and other states made, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And the results will be the same. And I intend on making sure that that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you tremendously. You got at least my vote for sure. Oh man, I cannot talk. I'm trying to say for certain and for sure at the same time. But nonetheless, I appreciate you tremendously, and thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time. Sorry for the technical difficulty. I think it was combined on my end and your end. So anyway, I apologize for anything on my end.
It's certainly all right. We obviously had some stuff here at the beginning, so I'm sure that my end had a little bit to do with it too. But I appreciate you being here again, and God bless you.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you. All right, friends. So that was Ammon Bundy. Now, unfortunately, I know I did say we were going to get into some audience questions. I didn't end up seeing any audience questions. I do see this one here, but I don't know if that's actually for me, or if it was for Ammon. So I guess there was at least one. My apologies, Slam. Says, what you think about the people being held in jail for the supposed January 6th coup attempt? Actually, so he did answer that question. If I don't know if you had caught it or not, but what he had actually said is that he feels that the police force is currently being politicized, and he actually referenced specifically how the Biden administration is going after people who were at the January 6th event, and politically prosecuting them while avoiding people who it's more expedient for him not to avoid. So it was a kind of blink and you'll miss it thing. But if you go back to the question where I asked him about the police, he did actually answer that question there. I want to thank you guys tremendously for being here with us today. If you liked this video, please do like and share this video. Please remember to subscribe to the Synagogue News if you appreciate the Watchdog podcast. We go live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, talking Idaho local news, United States national news, and global news surrounding Israel, global religion, globalism, the Middle East, peace, a whole bunch of other stuff. A lot of stuff to cover here on the Watchdog. So if you like that, please remember to subscribe, hit that bell so you get notified every time that we go live. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Minds, or Parler. Just go ahead and go at the Synagogue there. And of course, you can follow us on Patreon and contribute there if you feel that we are worthy of turning this, as well as my apologetics, if you contribute for that reason, into a career. So if you want to do that, you can certainly do that as well. And you can find me any of these places at the Synagogue. Please remember to go to BitChute and Rumble and subscribe to the Synagogue there. I only post the Synagogue news stuff there, and we have had some technical issues recently, so it's not actually up to date. But that is our backup plan in case YouTube ever decides to come after this channel. It's already taken down a couple of videos, so please remember to do that. Also, we had a guest today, so remember that you can go to votebundy.com and support him by giving financial donations, by contributing to the campaign through things like this, like merch, the Keep Idaho, Idaho hat, or Ammon Bundy for governor shirt. You can also see different events and things of that nature that he is planning in the future. And also, you can follow him at the Ammon Bundy for Governor campaign page on Facebook or Ammon Bundy on Twitter. I don't know what his actual tag is, but I know that his display name is just Ammon Bundy. So definitely be sure to check all of that stuff out. I appreciate you guys tremendously. Remember to be watchdogs and ask yourselves this question. In the face of Armageddon, will you compromise? And shalom.